Good morning or good afternoon, depending on which time zone you are in. Welcome to this webinar on OT-Base Asset Center 6.4, where I will talk you through the most important product extensions. By the way, if you don't know me, I'm Ralf Langner, founder and CEO of Langner Incorporated, also founder and Geschäftsführer, Managing Director of Langner Communications GmbH, which is the German counterpart of the company. So before we go into it, I would also like to announce or make you aware of a new product extension that you can see in my background. Yesterday, we not only released Asset Center 6.4, but also the new OT-based connector for Power BI, which we think is just awesome for those of you who want to do analytics using Power BI rather than OT-based Asset Center, which does make a lot of sense for certain use cases. Let me be very clear about that. So I think when it comes to dashboards and also about the necessity to present certain aspects of your OT infrastructure to management, then Power BI is very hard to beat. And that's the reason why we developed this new product extension, the OT-based Power BI connector. If you are interested in this product, please contact Tavone Harris, our VP of Sales, for additional details. I can tell you already it's going to cost you an arm and a leg, but it's worth it. So let's go into Asset Center 6.4 and let's see what's new in there. What you see here is the device inventory. And this looks like what you already know if you're using the product. And the addition here is that you can, for the selection that you have made, is you can display a couple of basic charts just by magnifying this new pane here. Okay, so you can just flip it up and down. And if you expose it, you see three different charts for vendors, asset types, and product models. And certainly, as you would expect, these are dynamic. So if we just apply a filter such as let's only focus on PLCs, then this changes automatically. So that is new. The next thing is new. There are a couple of additions to the search page. Let's just go there. First of all, now you can expose a couple of additional fields down here for the results. And as always in OT-Base, you do that by opening the context menu for those columns. And I think the most important aspect is that you now can also expose your custom fields, which was missing. And we knew it was missing because a couple of customers required this. And now you can also expose your custom fields, such as in our sample database, we have mean time to recover, and we have also SAP Equipment ID, which seems to be quite popular among OT-based users. So now you can also see those in the search output, and certainly you can also use them for filtering and for sorting, etc. And other fields that are also new is product lifecycle and device criticality. So now you can also check the lifecycle, and you can, you can also check the criticality, like so. You couldn't do that before. And now if you are wondering, wow, you know, all these new additions, they make the search page so much more useful, but the display area is so small. There is also a remedy for that, because if you click on this double up arrow here in the right, on the right margin, then you get the full screen real estate for that table. How cool is that? And just to top it off, you can also now save your searches as you know it from other tables. So if you click on this new Manage Searches button, you see that for the search at hand for all the filter settings you have made regarding location, device characteristics, etc., you can now also filter those settings and then retrieve them later just by opening this drop down right here. So you see I have two searches stored already. So if you would just filter for critical devices, all you need to do is just use that menu item right here. And now all the devices that are exposed here, they have a criticality assigned to them. Or just to show you another sample search, if I'm interested in obsolete products, I would use this saved search right here, and that would give me a result table with all the discontinued products in that sample here. Okay, the next new feature is in the device inventory. So you have seen from earlier versions, if you're using OT-based for a while, that you can get additional context on the connectivity, on the network context, just by clicking on that network that is exposed for the device, or one of the many networks that are exposed. And what is new in 6.4 is that when you open the topology diagram, that the output is automatically zoomed in on the device from which you are calling the network profile. And as you can see, it's also highlighted with a red border, and that just saves you some time. So in earlier versions, you now would have to try to find that damn device among all those others, among all those other controllers, etc. So this is going to save you valuable time. Then we go to the vulnerability management, where a couple of very important additions have been made. So first, there is a new table, which is the vulnerability details table. If you compare this to the list that you already know, the list displays CVEs. So every row, every single entry represents one CVE, and then you can see the affected products, the affected devices for that particular CVE. The details table shows devices as they are affected by an individual CVE. That means you're going to see a lot of entries for a given CVE if that CVE affects multiple devices, and also vice versa. You will see a lot of entries for a given device, such as in this example right here, abc.desktop1. You see that multiple times because that single device is plagued with a bunch of vulnerabilities. So in a way, you could say this is similar to what you know from the software inventory in OT-based. You can look at software products, but you can also look at software instances where you see one row per installation. And this is very similar. Certainly the benefit here, or the use case, is when you start with your vulnerability management. In OT, the vulnerability management often involves compensating controls. So just to give you an example, there are so many situations in OT where patching is just not the right solution because it's going to be much more expensive than applying mitigating controls. Now, if you do apply mitigating controls such as network security, OT-Base will not be able to discover that automatically, but you can tell OT-Base, okay, these are mitigated right now. All these vulnerabilities for that given set of devices, that's mitigated. And you could do that already in earlier versions if you would just open this edit dialog right here, where you could go to the affected devices and then do a couple of clicks here. But we have learned from user feedback that this wasn't good enough because sometimes you also need to give a rationale why you flag a given device as no longer affected by a particular vulnerability for your auditing, right? So you want to be able to provide the reason why this is actually no longer affected by that vulnerability. And this is what you can do here. This is what you see in this comments column right here. So you can tell OT-Base or your auditors, okay, this is why we have flagged those devices as no longer vulnerable for that particular vulnerability. And it works as you would probably expect it. So you can do a multi-edit here. You can select multiple entries or devices at once. And then if you click on edit, you can now set a couple of flags, like you can declare those vulnerabilities as fixed, or you can declare them as irrelevant, and you can also provide a comment that would then show up here in this new column. And certainly that's a great way to document your mitigation process and make it auditable. The next thing that is new in Asset Center 6.4 is that the vulnerability distribution charts in the vulnerability profiles are now up to scale. So if you look at any of those vulnerability profiles, that histogram down here with the affected devices, you have seen that earlier, but all the bars were the same length. And yeah, that leaves something to desire, because you probably would like to see right away where the biggest problems are. And now this is possible because they're up to scale. So you would see right away, well, for this particular vulnerability, which even is coming with a known exploit, our biggest problem is in Charlotte. It's not in Zeven, it's in Charlotte. We have 28 devices that are vulnerable for this nasty vulnerability. So that gives you a little bit quicker idea where your problems might be. If you look in this table or at that page, at that particular list here, you will probably already have spotted another new feature. That's this button right here, vulnerable only. So in previous versions that didn't exist, and that meant when you looked at that list, you would also see a bunch of vulnerabilities that were completely patched, as those down here where your fixed ratio bar is all blue, all good. We are just fine and dandy with those vulnerabilities. And you also see that reflected in the zeros here in the number of vulnerable devices column. So with the reality being that most users are only interested in what's still vulnerable, in previous versions, you would have to apply a filter in this column and telling OT-Base will only show me those entries with more than 0 devices in the vulnerable section. And now you can do the same thing by just clicking the checkbox, which is activated by default. So by default, you will now only see any CVEs where you do have some vulnerable devices, at least one. And if you want to see everything, including those CVEs that you have already fully patched, then you can just uncheck that box. Next, a new feature is in the, back to the inventory, in the location directory, where you now can also do multi-edits, bulk edits. So for example, let's just say I want to make changes to a couple of locations and sub-locations. I can now select a bunch of these. And now if I click on the edit button, any changes that I do here will be applied to all of the locations that I have selected. Now, obviously, there are only few fields that you can reasonably change with this functionality, and those would be the location group, where you can assign a particular a group to all of those locations, and the company name. But maybe the most important feature that you can use here is you can move all these locations to a new place in the hierarchy. And this is usually quite beneficial when you import a set of new devices from a new run with Asset Discovery, and you haven't already mapped out your location hierarchy in Asset Center, and then you can move those locations to the right spot in the hierarchy. So that will save you a lot of time. Then finally, you're almost done. If you go to the maintenance page and to metadata, you can now pull the metadata from a server that is located in the United States. Wiley, that one's for you. Wiley knows who I'm talking to. So that was a specific request by a customer because their policies didn't allow them to pull data from a server outside of the US, which is the case with this server that you see here by default, metadata.otbase.com. This server is physically located in Europe. And if that is a problem for you, you can now select the US-based server. Data is identical. So you have that problem solved. Okay, that's basically it. There are a couple of I would say minor extensions, new features, etc. But those would be, for example, with the REST API. So that's minor stuff, minor details that I don't want to go through here. The only thing I would like to point out here is that Asset Center 604 now also supports the EtherCAT series of field buses and Mitsubishi Melsec PLCs. In order to use any of those, you will have to install Asset Discovery 10.1 or higher. And when you do that, and you do have backup devices, for example, with EtherCAT, you will also be able to see them in Asset Center. Just a quick note for those who are using EtherCAT, the connection is made via a TwinCAT router. So as those of you who are using the technology will know, EtherCAT is a field bus that does not use IP, so therefore we cannot directly access your EtherCAT devices. This is accomplished by connecting to the TwinCAT router, and then we get access to all those EtherCAT devices, or to the configuration, how they are configured in that network architecture. So that is basically it. Those who know me will know and hopefully appreciate that I try to keep things short, brief, and up to the point. Let's just see if we have any questions in the Q&A. No, we don't. Now is your first and last chance. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. Otherwise, we will finish rather early today. Saved you almost 40 minutes, you know, all the good things that you can do with that time. So let's just wait a couple of minutes until people may have made up their mind if they want to ask a question or not. So, oh, Mr. Mahoney, any plans to building links based on SAP equipment number to SAP? Not necessarily. So here is how this, how my example came into being. So that the SAP equipment ID that you have seen in my demo earlier, that was a sample custom field that I had inserted into our sample database because it was requested a couple of times by customers. So we really got to expose that SAP equipment ID. And as with any other custom field, that's simple. And now you will also see that in the search output. How does the data come from SAP into OTBase? Simple answer, in our case, via the REST API. So the customers with that request, and I think some of those are even participating in this webinar, they already have that output. So they have already pulled that data from SAP. They will probably have it in an Excel table as an intermediate storage. And as you may know already, anything that is in an Excel table or in an XML file or Python file, you can very easily push it into Asset Center. So this is how presently such a feature is used. It's just another metadata item. Same thing like GPS, latitude, longitude for locations. Anything that you have sitting in other digital documents, such as an Excel table, easy to push into Asset Center. Hope that answers your question mark. Any other questions? Okay, that is not the case. So we are ending very early. And if you didn't realize, Asset Center 604 was released yesterday along with Asset Discovery 10.1. Please only use Asset Discovery 10.1 in connection with Asset Center 604. It's not backward compatible because of these new EtherCAT features and MailSec. Okay, thank you for your time and enjoy Asset Center 604.